If I sound funny, it's because I have a cold. But this is the only time I can do this. So ready? This is CNN.
On February 10th, 2015, Jon Stewart announced that he was leaving The Daily Show on Comedy Central. Following his announcement, this brought the instant onslaught of speculation. Who will replace Jon Stewart?
And more importantly, will anyone continue to watch without him? On March 30th, we got our answer, or at least part of it. Comedy Central announced that the new host of The Daily Show will be 31-year-old South African comedian Trevor Noah.
First, I'd like to say, I don't care what the Huffington Post piece said. Tina Fey was never an option, and neither was Amy Poehler. Yes, I know their history, and I know they used to do Weekend Update together on SNL, and I know many wanted to see a woman in the chair. However, Tina Fey is a hugely successful writer and producer. She currently has a hit sitcom on Netflix, The Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt. Amy Poehler is a successful writer and actress. She's not going to give that up to host The Daily Show either. Brian Williams was also a non-starter. Williams is a legit newsman, and he's going to want to get back into that if possible.
The other choices that some kept repeating, such as Chris Rock and Sarah Silverman, were wishful thinking at best. As much as I like Joel McHale, he didn't want to do it. He said that he's not smart enough. Another name I heard tossed around was former Daily Show correspondent Michael Shea, but he's having a hard enough time keeping down his job at SNL.
Like the rest of the country, I was only vaguely familiar with Trevor Noah.
Who?
I had seen his 3 previous appearances on The Daily Show, and quite frankly, they didn't impress me all that much. He seemed stiff, awkward, the material felt forced, and the jokes just weren't funny. His second appearance was particularly bothersome. With a bit clearly tanking before our eyes, Stewart desperately tried to salvage a lost cause. Watching it, I kept asking myself, how long are they going to let this go on for? The worst part was that during the bit, Noah seemed smug and condescending, which made him seem unlikable. After his second appearance, I was certain he wouldn't be invited back for a third. I was absolutely shocked when I heard that he was now going to be host of the program. Almost immediately after the announcement came news of his off-color Twitter remarks, which made an already unflattering view of him worse. Rushing to his defense, Comedy Central issued a statement. Like many comedians, Trevor Noah pushes boundaries. He's provocative and spares no one, himself included. To judge him or his comedy based on a handful of jokes is unfair. Trevor is a talented comedian with a bright future at Comedy Central. Noah also stated in his defense, to reduce my views to a handful of jokes that didn't land is not a true reflection of my character nor my evolution as a comedian.
But this also reveals a larger problem with Trevor Noah. It's not that the jokes didn't land, it's that he made them in the first place. The jokes weren't funny, and they were mean-spirited. As Dave Chappelle said, you have to know when to keep it real and when not to. These were times you didn't want to keep it real.
Even with the controversy behind his Twitter feed and after his 3 appearances on The Daily Show, I keep hearing from his fans, watch his stand-up, it's hysterical. So I did. And I have to ask, when do I get to the hysterical part?
Trevor Noah's material is far too specific, and unless you're from South Africa, you're not going to get a lot of it.
His material is also very dated. He's still doing many of the AIDS jokes Eddie Murphy was doing back in the 1980s, and the Africa jokes that Richard Pryor was doing back in the 1970s. If he were as funny as Pryor and Murphy, that wouldn't be a problem, but he's not. So all of this makes me wonder why exactly Trevor Noah was selected as new host of The Daily Show. New York Times reporter David Itzkoff stated on March 30th that Trevor Noah didn't even receive a formal audition, unless you count the 3 appearances that he previously made on the show. With the lack of a clear vetting process, it only leads to more questions and not fewer. But there are a few things to consider as to why Comedy Central arrived at this decision. The Daily Show is currently seen in over 84 countries around the world. It's quite possible that Comedy Central is positioning the program to become a global brand. And Noah, a South African comedian with a large international following, might give the program the appearance of being less American. That in and of itself is a mistake, because the show's appeal is rooted in American pop culture and American political discourse. Many have also been claiming that part of the fan backlash is because he's not American, which is false, and here's why. John Oliver, who had been on the show for 7 years prior to filling in for Jon Stewart as host during the 10-week stretch while he went to Jordan to film Rosewater, wasn't American either. The audience responded to Oliver because he's clearly talented enough to carry the show, which he now proves on a weekly basis on Last Week Tonight. Oliver is also a talented stand-up, and he's been extremely funny on the sitcom Community.
The other part of the problem is that, as stated before, Trevor Noah is just not likable.
While John Oliver pokes good-natured fun at his adopted home, Trevor Noah comes across as smug and condescending. The Daily Show's audience doesn't mind satire at their own expense,
but they will not tolerate being spoken down to. Jon Stewart was said to be involved in selecting Noah as his replacement. However, that doesn't exactly inspire confidence. While it's true that Stewart was also the one to recommend Stephen Colbert for the 11:30 slot after The Daily Show, that was a case of nobody being able to deny Colbert's talent. Stewart was also recently involved in selecting Larry Wilmore to replace Colbert in the vacated 11:30 slot, a decision that now seems questionable since The Nightly Show has lost 40% of Colbert's former audience. Of all potential candidates for Stewart's replacement, it would seem that Jason Jones would have been the best fit. He's experienced, he's proven himself to be funny, and he goes the extra mile in every piece he's done. But when news came that Jones and Samantha Bee were developing their own series for TBS, one has to question whether or not they saw the writing on the wall. The other more obvious choice would have been current Daily Show correspondent Jordan Klepper, but it's currently unknown whether or not he was offered the job, or even considered. If Comedy Central were looking outside the Daily Show family, then a good choice would have been host of The Majority Report and MSNBC contributor Sam Seder. Seder is an experienced voice actor and stand-up comedian. He's also well-versed in politics, and he's an excellent interviewer. Seder also has a likable demeanor and the self-effacing style of humor that Stewart possesses. But again, we don't know what the selection process was or if there even was one at all. Oddly enough, Daily Show veteran Louis Black recently stated that he wasn't even given the opportunity to audition for the gig, and neither was Jones or Samantha Bee. At least on the surface, it appears there wasn't a proper vetting process at all.
No doubt feeling the pressure from the audience, media, and from Comedy Central and their parent company Viacom, Stewart opened the April 6th episode of The Daily Show with an impassioned plea to the audience to give Trevor Noah a chance to earn your trust and respect. Or not. However, I think the damage has already been done. Given the exodus of Colbert's audience from The Nightly Show, there's really nothing to indicate that there's anything Comedy Central can do to stop the bleeding. In his October 20, 2010 interview with Larry King, Stewart said that if he were thinking of abandoning a sinking ship, he'd bring in a guy nobody has heard of so the audience would say, "Who's that and why is he speaking so funny?" With that in mind, one has to question now if this is actually part of the plan. As Stewart departs, is he planning on throwing a lit match behind him and blowing up the entire enterprise? Or does Comedy Central feel that this is really the best guy to fill the chair? Considering the controversy that's followed Trevor Noah and the abandonment of The Nightly Show by the audience, my personal feeling is that Comedy Central, rather than firing him, will allow the show to tank and either force a change or completely cancel the program altogether. Either way, I don't think we'll be tuning in to see Trevor Noah as host of The Daily Show a year from now. That's it for now. Join us next episode for our Summer Movie Spectacular with special guest Jake Bentley. See you next time.